editorial director of The Mix, and I'm here to help kick off sprint number 3 of the Management 2.0 Hackathon. Now, you spent the last phase of the hackathon exploring and debating how the principles of the web could help devise a set of new management principles for a new age. You came up with some 40 principles and debated those in the forum, and now we've distilled them into 12 core principles, from openness to autonomy to meritocracy to experimentation and serendipity. Now, these aren't an exhaustive list, of course, and they're not mutually exclusive, but we think taken together they begin to add up to a new management ideology and, probably more importantly, pathways forward when it comes to making our organizations more resilient, more inventive, and inspiring and accountable. So this next phase is all about learning from the Vanguard, looking at organizations and leaders and experiments where these 21st century principles are actually being put into action. We are on the hunt for the most progressive companies, experiments, initiatives, leaders who are actively wrestling with these principles today, especially when it comes to real-world organizational processes. So how decisions get made, how power gets distributed, how resources get allocated, how tasks and jobs get assigned, all of those important day-to-day details of life. How are these principles being put into action? So in other words, we are looking for the positive deviance. We are asking you to find the pioneers who are out there experimenting at the edges and inventing the future in a very real way. So this sprint is not about best practices, it's really about what we might call next practices, and we're asking you to go out there and look around corners, explore the fringe, go far afield. You might think of it as Apple's iconic Think Different campaign. We're on the hunt for the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs in square holes. Now, why do this? Well, as one of my favorite maverick thinkers and leaders likes to put it, Dan Wyden, he says creativity is fundamentally subversive in nature. And I really do believe that the future doesn't start top down or center out, but from the fringe, from the outside in. That's how it unfolds. And we need to go out and look at the far front edge, the people who are doing things that are radically different, fearless, bold, original. Plus, I think not only will we come up with a lot of ideas, a lot of experiments to learn from, we'll stretch our thinking about the principles, but probably most importantly, I think we'll gain a little bit of that spirit, that fearlessness, that courage that it takes to try to change the system even when you don't control the system. So I think that'll be a great warm-up for us, both in terms of inspiration and ideas as we go into the hacking phase of this Management 2.0 Hackathon. So to get you started on this phase, what I thought I would do would be to explore a few of the principles and tell you a couple stories just to get you warmed up and raring to go on your search for the Vanguard companies, the positive deviants. So first up, openness. Openness, of course, is one of the fundamental principles of the web. We've all heard the mantra, information wants to be free, and indeed it is on the web. That can be a double-edged sword sometimes, but this is an idea that's infecting organizations in a very real and important way. And openness also, we should remember, isn't just about information transparency. It's about fundamentally rethinking what's inside and what's outside the organization and making those borders a little bit more permeable, thinking differently about where good ideas can come from, who actually is part of the organization and who's not. So those are some of the things to think about when you think about openness. Quick story. We've come to know an Australian software company called Atlassian. There are a couple great stories on the Mix which you can find and explore. And this is a company whose ruling value is openness by default. Actually, it's stated open company, no bullshit, but I don't know if we want to make this a PG video. And I'll read it just to reinforce this idea. So Atlassian embraces transparency wherever at all practical, and sometimes where impractical. All information, both internal and external, is public by default. We are not afraid of being honest with ourselves, our staff, and our customers. And they really do mean it. There's no place to hide inside Atlassian. All of the sales data, business plans, project status, recruitment information, performance review information, all of that is open to everyone inside the company. More widely, Atlassian shares its source code, its customer feedback, all kinds of information with the wider community that's associated with the company. Work is basically done in public at Atlassian. All communication takes place inside a company wiki. There are very few person-to-person emails. Everything is openly debated, again, from the strategic plan down to project details. Everywhere you go inside Atlassian, you see these mega video screens, which are a constant link to the other offices. So if you're in San Francisco, you can see your colleagues working in Sydney, Australia, again, to keep it open, to make this communication, these boundaries, much more permeable. And the effect of that is the habit is to share rather than to hoard information, to openly debate, agree, disagree on the most important aspects of the company, and to really reinforce that behavior. The head of talent, Joris Luque, said to me, it's really incredible. You can see in the wiki if someone displays this behavior, someone might put up, hey, that's awesome, how cool, that's so open company, no bullshit. So they're effectively tagging their values and reinforcing them as an organization as they go along. Now, you might say it's easy for an open source software company to adopt this kind of an attitude, and maybe it is more natural, but I would submit that for every organization, finding a way to share information, to align people rather than to hoard information, to control people is going to be more and more important. Now, let me give you a quick point about this openness when it comes to the boundaries of the organization and innovation and where good ideas come from. We've all heard a lot about open innovation, and I think what it fundamentally is about this basic mind flip among leaders around what are the boundaries of my company and where do good ideas come from. Classic case study here is the story of Larry Houston at Procter & Gamble, then the head of R&D, and he was confronted with this problem that, you know, even the 9,000 brilliant researchers of P&G's vaunted research organization, the smartest scientists, technologists, researchers in the world, even they could not possibly be working on all the important relevant problems to Procter & Gamble's many product lines and many priorities. So what he decided was to fundamentally think differently about where ideas could come from for P&G, and he did a worldwide search, and what he found was, you know, there are actually 1,809,000 researchers, technologists, scientists in the world, all over the world, working on problems and experiments that are relevant to what Procter & Gamble is doing or might want to do in the future. So my job is to figure out a way to connect with them, help develop their ideas in a way that's a win for them and a win for us. And that's really the open attitude that we're talking about when we talk about this principle of openness. Next step, autonomy. Now, the history of organizations and management for way too long has been a history of control, controlling people, controlling information, controlling deviations from the norm. But now in a world when we're asking for the full imagination, initiative, passion, contribution of every single human being, control looks like a pretty creaky system. And in so many ways on the web and what the web has shown us and in organizations as well, freedom is a bigger game than power. And the organizations and the leaders that figure out not what can I control, but what can I unleash? Can I unleash more contribution, more passion, more effort, more creativity? Those are the folks who win today. And so we're always looking for people who have organized, who have designed more autonomy into their organizations, who are thinking about how can they unleash, again, more contribution, more creativity, more productivity. And one of the most unlikely stories we've come across that's been so rich is the story of Morningstar, the world's largest tomato processing company. If you've had ketchup or pizza sauce or spaghetti sauce, chances are you probably have eaten tasted one of their products. But more importantly, Morningstar has to be one of the most radical experiments for the last 40 years in self-management that we've ever seen. Now, this company was founded on a really important question, which is, what kind of a company do we want to be? A question we think a lot of organizations would do well to stop and ask themselves. What kind of a company do we want to be? Well, the philosophy that came out of really reflecting on that question involved a few ideas. One, people are happiest when they have control over their own lives. The best human organizations are the ones in which people aren't managed and controlled by other people, but in which they organize their relationships and commitments and manage those themselves amongst themselves. And third, the assumption that people are thinking, caring, creative, energetic beings. So that was really the foundation on which this radical experiment in self-management was created, and a company in which there are no bosses, where everybody figures out their own commitments and their own job roles amongst themselves, amongst their peers, where anybody can spend the company's money, where everybody is responsible for acquiring the tools and the knowledge and the capability to do their own job. Where compensation is a peer-based decision. Pretty radical stuff. And the cornerstone of it is something called the Colleague Letter of Understanding, or CLUE. And the CLUE is at the core of everything they do. These are contracts, basically contracts about your personal mission, your fundamental purpose inside the organization, that you negotiate on a yearly basis with a set of colleagues, 10 or more people, that you then call your CLUE colleagues. They sign this contract. You are responsible to them. You spell out a whole set of tasks, stepping stones, goals, and they now have this built into a very dynamic, online, visible system where you can see some 3,000 peer-to-peer relationships dynamically moving in the company. And they morph and evolve year to year as people evolve year to year, and as the challenges the company faces evolves year to year, which is a much more dynamic, responsive, resilient way to operate, again, in a world where we all know change happens so quickly. So much more to unpack with the Morningstar model, and you can check out a couple of the cases on the mix, and you can read Gary's incredible story in HBR to learn more about this principle of autonomy. So let's talk about serendipity. The web has to be one of the most productive engines of serendipity we've ever seen, whether you're talking about all the hyperlinking you can do or the relentless hunger for new things generated and fueled by social media platforms. So much value and creativity comes out of all the connections, collisions, and relationships that spring up on the web spontaneously. And we would argue that our organizations could use a lot more of that productive happenstance, but you just don't hear about serendipity being a design principle in a lot of organizations these days. So let me tell you about a couple places where it actually is. First up, Pixar Animation Studios. If you have a kid, know a kid, or are a kid at heart, you have seen one of Pixar's movies. You probably know that it is the creative juggernaut that reinvented the art of animation, has killed at the box office, and just really is a phenomenal organization by any means you look at it. And probably, I think, because of its very unique, original design for creative work. At the heart of Pixar is this question: how do we get individual geniuses, creative talents, these folks that we hire from all over the world, to work together productively to create these works of art time after time after time? And the organizing principle around that idea inside Pixar, if you ask anybody, is this question: how do you do work? How do you do art as a team sport? How do you do art as a team sport? It's a great question for any organization. One of the answers inside Pixar is, well, make the workplace a canvas for that art, which in the case of Pixar, of course, is the art of storytelling. So you go inside Pixar's incredible campus outside of San Francisco, and you see story plastered on every surface. Every square foot of the place is covered with story, whether you go to Story Corner and learn how to storyboard, or you look at the color schemes on another wall, or you go to one of the art galleries that display art from the films or art from a personal collection, or the art of the folks who work inside the organization, whether you go into the daily screenings of the film they're working on that are open to everybody inside the company, whether you go to the post-film science fairs that go on for 3 days where folks learn about every mistake, every lesson that was learned, again, open to everyone, whether you spend time inside Pixar University and go to any of the 100+ classes that are offered there. The fact is that Pixar work in progress is available to everyone everywhere, and you can't help but bump into it. And what that says is, we want your opinion, we want your questions, we want to spark connections, again, serendipitous connections that wouldn't happen if this stuff wasn't out in the open and available to everyone. And we don't care if you are a production assistant or a famous director or the company chef. If you have an idea, we want to hear from you about that idea. So at Pixar, again, this idea of how do we share information to align and connect people rather than hoard it to control people. Another thing that all this serendipity does is it allows for sort of maximum fidelity of an idea as it bounces around in someone else's head and then bounces together with other people and then gets out into the marketplace. So it's really a beautiful thing to both open up and to create moments of serendipity. One little side note, so Steve Jobs is, of course, one of the co-founders of Pixar, and his one note when they were building or renovating the new headquarters of Pixar was he wanted there to only be one single bathroom in the whole campus. Now, of course, the facilities people didn't let that happen, but the point was, how do we create ways for people to bump into each other on a daily basis? So what they have instead is a great big atrium space where the mailroom is, where a restaurant is, where a bunch of tables, pool tables, ping pong tables, you name it, all are there so people will want to congregate and again bump into each other in a serendipitous fashion. This is a habit you can cultivate as an individual and a leader, trying to get people out of their comfort zone, out from behind their desk, and mix it up with elements that are not like them. So let's talk about meaning. This principle, I think, is so important because when we talk about the web and new management principles, we've talked a lot about autonomy and experimentation and serendipity and meritocracy and a lot of new ideas coming forward. I think at the same time, one enduring truth holds even more true, which is that the fundamental galvanizing, mobilizing force when it comes to human effort and creativity and productivity is a deep and distinctive sense of purpose. The compelling why. Why should I get up in the morning, and what's worth my life when I go to work day in and day out? And the organizations that are the most compelling and the most successful, I would argue, are those that have articulated that deeply felt, distinctive, original, bold, even disruptive sense of purpose that really communicates not just to potential employees, but to the wider community in which they operate. This is the cause we're fighting for. These are the set of the ideas that we believe in. These are the stakes in the ground. What we stand for, what we're against, what we will always do, what we will never do. You really have to think of it as the pivot foot. When everything else is changing around us, when innovation is so important and trying new things and experimenting is so important, the pivot foot, the thing that grounds you, is this deep and abiding sense of purpose. Just a quick story on this one. There's so many wonderful examples of organizations that are guided by that deep sense of purpose. One that I love is really a story of re-finding a sense of purpose. And it's a story of Lego, an iconic company that we all know about, which is an 80-plus-year-old company, had kind of lost its way by early 2000, experimenting with all things digital and trying to figure out how to enter into a new age. When Jürgen Vignudstorp, a youngish CEO, 40-something years old, took over at that time, he had to deal with getting the financial house in order and making sure that Lego would survive into next generation. But he very quickly turned himself to the question, what makes us totally unique? What makes Lego what Lego is? And he did something really important. He didn't ask that question of a bunch of executives in a closed room. He went deep back into the past, into the archives, and really excavated what the founder had thought about playing well. He went out into the community and asked all the hardcore fans, from little kids up to adults, what Lego meant to them. And what came back to him again and again was not this notion of the brick or it's cool or it's fun, but this notion of systematic creativity, really learning something. And the way that Jorgen articulated that was hard fun. The kind of fun that's like reading a damn book, he said to me. And you really get the picture. It's not about passively sitting in front of the TV or being entertained. It's really about the kind of creativity that opens up a world for you. And that's something the entire community can get behind. Re-articulating that sense of purpose was what helped Lego open up and create a community of designers and volunteers and contributors from all over the world who weren't necessarily hired by the company, but who have worked on any number of projects over the last several years. So again, the questions that I use as a diagnostic when I go into an organization, when I'm looking for an organization that's led by purpose, are very simple. One, what ideas are you fighting for? Can you articulate in a really clear, compelling, distinct, homegrown language what it is you stand for and what you don't stand for? And then the second follow-up question is always, are you really who you say you are? It's one thing to have a beautifully articulated mission statement. It's another thing to follow it, live by it, day in and day out. So we hope these principles and these stories will get you warmed up and excited for your task of exploration and discovering all of the positive deviants out there. This is a really important step, not just for gathering insight and ideas and all kinds of inspiration as you go into the hacking phase. It's really important because what you are helping to create is a public resource, so all of the other aspiring management innovators out there and aspiring hackers out there have something that will inspire them and get them started as well. So thank you so much for your efforts and have a great time during this phase.